The silence in our home wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressing down on me like humidity before a storm. Every evening, Rajiv and I sat across from each other at the dinner table, the clink of cutlery our only form of conversation. He scrolled on his phone while I mechanically pushed vegetables around my plate. We used to talk once. We used to laugh. Now, I wasn't sure we even breathed in sync anymore. Rajiv had once been magnetic, confident, smart, a natural leader who could command a room without raising his voice. We met during college orientation. He noticed me fumbling with my papers and offered help with a smile that made me forget where I was. Our chemistry was undeniable. He liked that I was shy, said it made him feel protective. I liked that he seemed so sure of everything, of me, of US, of his future. We married 2 years after graduation. By then, he had a job at a growing tech firm, and I worked in content strategy for a publishing house. It felt like the beginning of something stable, beautiful even. But somewhere between the wedding photos and now, his confidence had curdled into control. It started small, asking me to send a text when I got to work, then when I left. I thought it was sweet at first, caring. But the questions grew sharper, more pointed. Who was that on the phone? Why did it take you 23 minutes to get home when your office is 15 minutes away? You never wore that lipstick before. Who are you trying to impress? I laughed them off. At first. But control doesn't show up all at once. It arrives like fog, quietly blanketing everything until you can't remember what the landscape looked like before it came. One evening, I stayed late at work to finish a deadline. When I stepped out of the building, there he was leaning against the car, engine idling. He hadn't told me he was coming. Just appeared, smiling. You didn't answer your phone, he said, brushing my hair from my face. I was in a meeting. You could have texted. He leaned closer. I didn't want to interrupt. It should have felt romantic. Instead, I felt like I was being watched. At work, I found myself slowly withdrawing. I stopped chatting during lunch breaks. I declined after-hours gatherings. I didn't want to give Rajiv more reasons to question me. But then I met Neha, a new copy editor, who sat 2 cubicles down. She had a wry sense of humor and an uncanny ability to sense tension. One day, during lunch, she caught me staring blankly at my sandwich. You look like you're either composing a poem or about to cry, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I forced a laugh. Maybe both. We became fast friends. With Neha, I didn't have to pretend. I told her things I hadn't said out loud even to myself. How Rajiv didn't hit me, but made me feel like I was always apologizing. How I felt like I was shrinking inside my own skin. Neha didn't try to fix me. She listened. Sometimes, she said one afternoon, we confuse habit for happiness. That line stayed with me. Around that time, I reconnected with someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Kabir, an old college classmate. He'd sent me a message on LinkedIn, congratulating me on a recent article I'd published. At first, it was innocent, casual. A message here, a comment there. But the chats grew longer, deeper. He remembered things about me that I'd forgotten myself. My obsession with Jimpalahiri, the way I used to hum when I read, the time I cried during a group presentation, and he was the only one who didn't laugh. You are always too tender for a world like this, he wrote one night. I hated how no one saw it. Rajiv hadn't said anything kind like that in months. I knew it was wrong. I wasn't blind to the emotional pull. I began deleting messages, locking my phone. My heart pounded every time I saw Kabir's name light up my screen. The thrill was intoxicating and terrifying. That week, I told Rajiv I had a late meeting at work. Instead, I went to a nearby cafe and video called Kabir. Seeing his face again, older, but somehow softer, made something inside me ache. How are you really? He asked. I wanted to lie, but the truth burst through my teeth. I feel like a ghost in my own life. There was silence on his end, then a nod. You deserve more than that. The next day, I found Rajiv staring at me in the kitchen. Just staring. Everything okay? I asked, opening the fridge. Do you think I don't notice? I froze. Notice what? The way you hide your phone. The way you smile when you're alone in the room. Like someone's whispering secrets you don't want me to hear. I turned slowly, heart pounding. I'm not hiding anything. He laughed. Not a joyful laugh, a dry, bitter one that rattled through me. Of course not. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him, his back to me. The hum of the ceiling fan overhead the only sound. The blades creaked as they turned, slow and ominous. I kept thinking about Kabir, about Neha, about how far I'd drifted from the woman who once dreamed of writing books and planting a garden. Now, I spent most evenings calculating my husband's mood like a weatherman predicting storms. And yet I stayed. Because sometimes the idea of starting over feels more frightening than staying miserable. The next morning, Rajiv made me breakfast. A rare gesture. Toast, eggs, tea, set out perfectly. He kissed my forehead and said, "You've been working too hard." I smiled, unsure of what was real. He walked me to the door and said, "You look beautiful today. That color suits you." I whispered a thank you and left, but my skin prickled as I stepped outside. It felt rehearsed, choreographed. I told Neha everything over lunch. She didn't react right away. Finally, she said, "He's trying to reel you back in. Don't ignore your instincts." I nodded, but my stomach twisted. It felt like something was shifting beneath the surface, like the ground beneath my life was about to give way. That night, Rajiv came into the bedroom holding a silk scarf. He smiled. "Let's play a game," he said. I blinked. "What kind of game?" "A fun one. Like we used to. Trust me." I should have said no. I should have stood up, walked out, called Neha, Kabir, anyone. But I didn't. I stayed. I always stayed. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. I stood in the bedroom doorway, watching Rajiv hold the silk scarf between his fingers like a magician about to reveal a trick. His smile was unreadable, pleasant on the surface, but too still, too controlled. I didn't trust it. "I thought we could try something fun tonight," he said. The air felt tighter suddenly. I glanced at the fan overhead, its blades idle, casting long, thin shadows across the ceiling. My mouth was dry, but I forced a response. "Like what?" Rajiv walked toward me with calculated ease. "A little game. Nothing intense. Just trust." That word again, trust. It felt more like a test than an invitation. He guided me to the bed, gestured for me to sit. I obeyed, half out of instinct, half out of fear I didn't yet want to name. My breath hitched as he knelt before me, lifting my right leg with unsettling gentleness. He wrapped the scarf around my ankle, looping it around the metal arm of the fan's support beam just above the bed. It wasn't tight, but the gesture sent a shiver through my spine. "I don't think," I began. Rajiv held up a hand. "Relax. It's just for fun. Don't you trust me?" There it was again. I nodded, because I didn't know what else to do. He walked over to the switch. The fan hadn't moved all day. It was winter, and we didn't need it. But now, as he flipped it on, I watched it begin to spin slowly, rhythmically, like it was waking from a long sleep. At first, nothing happened. My foot swayed slightly, the scarf tugging gently against my skin. I laughed, nervously, hoping it would defuse the tension. Then the jolt came. It was sharp, electric, like something alive had snapped its teeth into my leg. I gasped, trying to pull away, but the scarf held me there, tethered like an unwilling kite. The fan's hum turned sinister, like a warning I hadn't heard soon enough. "Rajiv!" I cried out. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching. When the shock ended, it left behind a numb tingling that crawled up my calf. I scrambled backward, yanking the scarf off and pulling my leg close to my chest. My hands trembled. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. Rajiv tilted his head. "You felt it too, didn't you?" I stared at him, the fear now fully realized. "What are you talking about?" "The betrayal," he said softly, like it was a bedtime story. "It burns. Just like that." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "I saw your messages, Sonia. I'm not stupid." He walked over, crouched at eye level. His face was calm, composed. Too composed. "You lied to me," he said. "Again and again. About meetings, about your phone, about him." I tried to get up, but he gently pushed my shoulder. Not hard, not bruising, but firm. Possessive. "I never touched him," I whispered. "Yet." His voice cracked slightly, just enough to betray the fury simmering beneath the surface. "You wanted to. Don't insult both of us by denying it." I finally stood, wobbling slightly. "You hurt me." His gaze darkened. "Not as much as you hurt me." I walked to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. My leg ached, the skin around my ankle pink and angry. I ran cold water, pressing a cloth to it while tears silently slipped down my cheeks. My mind was spinning, replaying every step, every message, every silence I had chosen over confrontation. Rajiv didn't raise his voice. He didn't slap or scream. But what he did was worse, calculated, deliberate, emotionally surgical. He had weaponized my own guilt against me. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, hummed while folding laundry, even offered me toast. "You seemed tense last night," he said casually. "Hope you're feeling better." I stared at him, wondering if he truly believed this was normal. That pain could be justified by suspicion. That betrayal, real or imagined, gave him the right to play judge and executioner. At work, Neha took one look at me and dragged me into a conference room. "You look like you haven't slept. What happened?" I hesitated. The words felt heavy in my mouth. Telling someone made it real. But silence had been my prison long enough. "He tied my leg to the fan," I said. "As a punishment." Her expression shifted immediately. "Are you serious?" I nodded. "Did he hurt you? Physically?" "Yes. Not badly. But he meant to scare me." Neha sat down slowly. "Sonia, this isn't just toxic. It's dangerous." He crossed a line. I felt ashamed. Not because I agreed, but because part of me had expected it. I had seen it coming like a train in the distance and hoped it would derail before reaching me. "I think he read my messages with Kabir," I confessed. Neha didn't blink. "Doesn't matter. Emotional betrayal doesn't justify abuse. Ever." She urged me to document everything. Photos. Notes. Voice recordings if possible. Her tone was clinical now, efficient, almost cold. But her eyes were full of concern. I nodded, promising I would. That night, I felt Rajiv's eyes on me as I brushed my hair in front of the mirror. He didn't say anything, just watched, as if he were waiting for something to break. And maybe something had. I slept in the guest room that night. He didn't stop me. The space between us grew like mold, quiet, spreading in corners we no longer touched. There were no more dinners together, no morning greetings, just silence and routine. But beneath that routine I was planning. Quietly, carefully. I began keeping my phone on record when we were alone. I stored the files in a private cloud account. I took photos of the mark on my leg. I saved screenshots. I didn't know exactly what I would do with them, but I knew I had to have them. I also stopped messaging Kabir. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed clarity. I couldn't untangle myself from one web while spinning another. When I told him I needed space, he understood. "I'm here when you're ready," he said. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in months. On a quiet Saturday morning, Rajiv stood at the window, sipping tea. Without turning, he asked, "Do you still think of him?" I didn't answer. He turned slowly. "Because I think of you and him. Every time I close my eyes." I met his gaze. "Then maybe it's time to stop closing them." He didn't reply. But for the first time, his face broke just a little. Not anger, not control. Just tiredness. Something fractured beneath the mask. He walked away. And in that moment, I realized something important. He could only hurt me as long as I kept standing still. I'd never realized how loud the sound of freedom could be until I started collecting it in fragments. Each small step I took, each photo, each recording, each journal entry, was a whisper turning into a scream. I wasn't running yet, but I was preparing. preparing to leave a man who had turned our marriage into a quiet war zone. One where the bombs didn't explode, but hummed beneath the surface, ready to go off the moment I blinked wrong. Rajiv was changing, too, but not in the way I'd hoped. He no longer asked questions or accused me. That would have at least meant engagement. Instead, he became eerily polite. He made me tea, without asking, folded my clothes, arranged the cushions on the couch, wiped down every surface like he was erasing the last traces of us. He was no longer a husband. He was a warden cleaning his cell. The day I submitted my resignation at the publishing house, I didn't tell him. I said I'd be working from home for a while, burnout, I claimed. The truth was, I needed space to act without being watched. Every second mattered. Neha helped me more than I could ever thank her for. She connected me with a lawyer, discreet, experienced with emotional abuse cases. She also put me in touch with a therapist who spoke softly but never pitted me. For the first time in years, I felt seen, heard, validated. "You're not crazy," the therapist had said after I described the scarf, the fan, the game. "You've just been made to feel that way." Those words stuck. A week later, I met with the lawyer in a small cafe across town. I wore sunglasses and a scarf, not for disguise, but to feel like someone else. Someone braver. We went over my options. The recordings helped. The photos. The messages. But he was honest, there would still be risks. Rajiv hadn't physically battered me in the traditional sense. But his actions bordered on criminal intimidation, and the emotional manipulation was significant. It wouldn't be easy, but I had a case. "You need a safe exit plan," the lawyer said. "Don't confront him. Just leave." So I planned. Quietly, I rented a small flat under a friend's name. 1 bedroom. Sparse furniture. Safe. I packed essentials into 3 small suitcases and hid them in the trunk of my car under a blanket. Every move was calculated. On a Thursday evening, Rajiv and I ate dinner in silence. The clink of the spoon against the plate. The sound of the water boiling in the kettle. The chair creaking under his weight as he sat beside me. "I saw your resignation letter on the printer," he said finally. I stiffened. "You went through the printer?" He shrugged. "It's our home. Our things. Why wouldn't I look?" That word again, ours. It no longer meant unity. It meant possession. "I need a break," I said, eyes fixed on my food. He leaned back. "Or are you running?" I met his gaze. "Maybe I am." He smiled, slow and cruel. "Wherever you run, you'll still be you. And eventually, you'll ruin that too." The words should have shattered me. Months ago, they would have. But instead, I felt a strange, still calm. "Maybe," I said. "But I'd rather fail trying to be free than keep surviving as your prisoner." He stood up sharply, the chair screeching against the floor. "You think this is prison?" he snapped. "You're ungrateful. You're selfish. You think that idiot Kabir could ever handle you? He doesn't know you. He just remembers who you pretended to be." I stood too, suddenly unafraid. "No, Rajiv. He remembers who I was before you broke me." The silence that followed was thick, pulsing with things we'd both wanted to say for years. But I didn't wait for him to answer. I walked out, heart pounding, head high. That night, I didn't go to the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. I lay fully dressed in bed, waiting for dawn. By 5 a.m., I was gone. Keys left on the table. Note on the fridge. "I'm not running. I'm choosing peace. Please don't follow me." I drove in silence, the city melting behind me, replaced by the quiet buzz of early morning traffic. Each red light felt like a checkpoint I'd cleared. Each green was a permission slip from the universe. When I reached the flat, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I unpacked slowly, methodically, 3 suitcases, 1 kettle, a stack of books. That evening, I called Neha. "I did it," I said. "I'm proud of you," she replied. "Take your time. Heal." I also messaged Kabir. Not to restart anything, but to say thank you for reminding me I was more than just someone's reflection. His reply was immediate. "You found your way out. That's all that matters. I'm here when you want a friend again." I sat on the balcony that night, watching the stars peek through a polluted sky. My tea was lukewarm, but I drank it anyway. And for the first time in years, my body wasn't tight with fear. My mind wasn't sprinting. It was quiet, the good kind. In the weeks that followed, Rajiv tried to call. Dozens of times. He sent messages that ranged from pleading to furious. One voicemail was just 10 seconds of silence, then a soft, "Come home. Please." I didn't respond. Eventually, the messages slowed, then stopped. The court process began a month later. My lawyer advised me not to attend every session. It would drain me, and the evidence was already compelling. The scarf, the mark, the files, the emotional pattern. Rajiv tried to argue that it had been a misunderstanding, a role play gone wrong, that I'd exaggerated, that I was mentally unstable. But I had the truth, and that truth had become my armor. The divorce was finalized 5 months later. No apologies, no last words, just a quiet stamp on a paper that marked the end of a life I'd barely survived. Now I live differently. My flat is still small, still quiet, but it's mine. I've started writing again. Just short pieces. Stories. Snippets of women reclaiming themselves. I don't write about Rajiv. Not directly. But sometimes I find pieces of him in the villains I create. And pieces of myself in the survivors. I still speak to Neha weekly. She reminds me where I started. Reminds me not to shrink. And Kabir? He's there too. Patient. Present. But I'm not rushing. This isn't about romance anymore. It's about me learning to breathe on my own again. Because I've learned something vital. Freedom isn't loud or grand or always triumphant. Sometimes, it's just a woman standing at the edge of her past and choosing not to step back.